It's a very fun conversation. It's a very wisdom oriented conversation. It's a conversation where I, on a personal scale, learned a lot and understood how a VC thinks. So, hello, my name is Palash, and let's just jump right into it.
Hello everyone, welcome back to a Ventureready podcast by Sofin. So, a podcast where builders and investors talk about what it really takes to create a venture ready company. So, today I have with me Varun. Varun, we all know you are an investor who has worked at companies like Walmart and Roblox. So, everyone can read your LinkedIn, but I'd like to start somewhere else. What's a moment in your journey that really shaped you who you are today, and how do you think as today?
It's hard to, first of all, thank you for having me on this platform. It is hard to think of one moment. Like we are all a lot of things, all each one of us, and so it'll be hard to say this one definite moment. But within the VC angle, the one moment I recall was I think somewhere in 2015 when I was in one of my first early stage startups as a single digit employee. I was looking at this founder invited VC, or I think that particular VC was a VC invested in that startup. And then subsequently, we had other VCs also who would come in, spend an hour over lunch and learn, like a Friday lunch and learn. Sort of the perks of being at early stage startups at that time in Silicon Valley. And so that is when I took notice of something called venture capital, which until then I didn't know. I just thought founders had money to start their own companies, otherwise it's hard, right? Or something of that sort. And then came this idea that, oh, now there is this VC. And so now this VC seems to have the money and the knowledge and the magnetism to hold an entire room captive to their speech, to what they have to say. Quite quickly, I was drawn to that idea of wanting to be that kind of a person because that resonated inherently with my desire to learn as many things as I can before I leave this world and enjoy doing that. So some things which were already consistent with that in my on a personal level were by that time I had already dabbled with a whole bunch of hobbies, things that did things, especially in Urbana Champaign, a small university town. Sorry, big university, small town. So I had the pleasure and joy to try things like something that as a kid that I could not pursue but I could pick it up. Believe it or not, I captained a cricket club there, real like leather ball season 40 over game invites. And then I tried my hand at rugby, flag football. I learned to play music and read music as well. I tutored at a medium security prison in Illinois. And so I had the experience of stepping into a prison system, rubbing shoulders to shoulders with the inmates whom we call students because they're there to learn and so on. So a lot of these things really happened because I genuinely am somebody who likes to dabble in things, and then some of
Mhm.
these things stick with me, and some other things have their own time. Like I don't play cricket anymore because it's past its time for me. Like I have other things that bring joy to me, but I do watch cricket. So things like that. Gardening is something that I like to do, and so on. So this is inherently me. So then this VC person being in this position where they knew a lot of things, had the money and the decision making, and were able to speak was something that I wanted to be. So in the VC side of things, at least that was one definitive moment that I can see. And ever since then, everything that I did was towards getting to a point of something of this sort. Right? Whether I did want to become a VC eventually or not, I wasn't sure. But I wanted to make sure that I was set up to do that and then try it. And that's what I essentially did from that point on, career wise. Otherwise, if
And
you go sufficiently back in time, I actually wanted to be a train driver. And it's a very common knowledge at this point. Train driver. Yes, that's it.
yeah, so you said about you set up something and then can you talk more about that? What was the process like and how did you reach where you are today?
Yeah, so the high level goal was to someday be a VC.
Mm-hmm.
And that VC idea also started with the naive idea of this one person having a lot of money, lot of power, knowledge, everything, right? And that was a good goal to have, like a lot of power, lot of knowledge, lot of money. Why not?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, along the way, I learned some things that's exactly not the way it works, and so on. But the few things that I definitely felt like I had to do, irrespective, were up level my knowledge, my skills, because that was still somewhat early to mid-early stage of my career. And I didn't know a whole lot anyway. I just knew like the best of what I was working on, but nothing really outside of it. Not insights, not industry level insights, and nothing of that sort. So I said, okay, well, maybe I need to learn more technology more aggressively. So I really went deep into the work that I was doing, burned midnight oil, learned how much ever I could. Then, where I felt like I was getting saturated, I moved to another company, again, picked up another technology and a different programming language, and so on. And then by that time, now, with the personal life, the way I've learned things, and with the professional life, the 3 years that I got to do this on a very fast basis, it gave me confidence that if I push myself and like just jump into the deep end of the pool, I can survive. And in surviving, I would have picked up some new skills. And that is the way I approached my career from that point on, or from like that 2015 onwards. And it worked. So one thing led to another opportunity. That opportunity led to another opportunity. So I joined Roblox in 2018. And the primary selling point for me at that point was that I could program in Go language. And so that was a hot thing on my resume. Even now, actually, I get approached by people saying, "Hey, can you join this Golang opportunity?" And I'm like, maybe hourly and part time, not like full time and that kind of stuff. I can still program in 7 languages. So so that happened because I was challenging myself to get more and more in uncomfortable spots. So anytime that I felt like I know everything and I'm leading this team and I'm comfortable and I'm ready for a promotion, at that point I would be like, but is that all? No, I want to do something else. So it was that way that I started tuning it. Roblox, again, within Roblox, I worked on 3, 4 different teams and projects. The idea being eventually to work on something that directly faces the users, because I wanted to build software that was not going into some company's infrastructure, but rather directly something you use. So we are using Zoom right now. So the developers building Zoom and the features and the UI are directly working on this. Of course, there's some backend work that is needed. Similarly, Google Meet, similarly, Airbnb, the app itself, right? Like Uber, some of these user facing apps. So I wanted to do that. So within Roblox, I was able to work on something more user facing. And so now I got a feel for, okay, not only B2B, but B2C and software overall. And now B2B and gaming and education and entertainment verticals. Then next I went to fintech, then e-commerce. So now I had a flavor for the wide range of the industry that is. By somewhere around Roblox time and a little after, I felt like software, and this was genuinely something that I believed and gave me a good reason to strongly double down on that, which is software is just a tool, right? And that tool you use to solve problems of the world. Could be entertainment, could be education, could be climate tech, could be agriculture. And so I started then dabbling into what the rest of the folks are building, right? And could I invest in that as an angel? Could I be involved in it and so on? So that's where I started. Along with the software journey, I also started adding the investing VC side of things or angel side of things as well. But to going back to your question, what did that mean? This is what that meant. So I wanted to make sure that I up level my skills, experience, and with that came the confidence. With that came the generalization capability. So once you've worked with a few industry verticals, somebody completely in a new industry can come to me and say, I'm trying to build technology for this, and I can still provide a high level solution. If I ask the right kind of questions and they answer, I have a feel for, okay, this is how you may want to build it, right? So that's how I got to that situation. And then started branching out into the venture side of things as well.
So, this is a very personal question. I also come from a very software background. So, what role did software development play in the venture angel side that you are in today? The problem solving aspect, like what role did it play?
Yeah, this answer may have been different if I had worked at very like bad companies, maybe. Like I think decent companies where the culture is good, where there's always a reward for asking the right questions, solving the problem, not finding a solution and then hoping there is a problem that you can take this with, right? So that was a key thing. There were teams, companies, individuals that occasionally showed up and it kind of felt like they have this agenda in mind where they want to push the solution and just everybody has to either fall in place or there would be ego clashes and so on. So I knew how not to do it. Then the best ones are the ones that very patiently would go over all the questions and concerns and come to a consensus or a reasonable amount of consensus that this is the best trade-off, this is the best way to go solve this problem for now. And along the way, at startups especially, it is also important to understand that there's no one magical solution that you can build right away from the beginning, and that iteration has to happen. And that iteration is happening on a sprint level. The iteration has to happen on a product design level, go-to-market level, everything. And so, I started expanding the iterative principles, and not only me personally, but even companies and teams, we were incentivized to figure this out on an iterative basis, in a collaborative basis, in some of the better teams that I worked at. And so that really helped strengthen this, and there was value generated. Whereas, of course, there were other ones where projects would be scrapped because they seemed like pet projects and so on. So these are ways that I think software shaped what I do at Venture Capital, which is the same thing I do it pretty iteratively, and I can talk about it in a bit. On a lighter note, working sufficiently long time in software also helped shape my restlessness to get out of software and do something else. It's like frustrating, like on-call hours and things like that. I'm like, and I'm on call for medical surgeons is a completely different thing, and I'm not even comparing it with that. But it still is like, man, I just want to go take a hike, but I have to be available and so on. So those kind of things just pushed me more away from software anyway.
I mean, I totally relate with that. I totally do. Like on calls are something. So,
Yeah.
like now talking like as we're talking about how you think, so when you meet a founder for the first time, what signals do you look like for them in the first 10 minutes?
There's not one set of things that I look for. Generally, are they able to convey the problem succinctly? And even meta level, I specifically look for, are they even assessing the room first? Stock taking. So before coming to me with like, hey, here's what we are building, or here's this problem which is significant, doing some little bit of interactive, are you aware of the space? Do you know this? Have you done this? And so on. Checking so that they're not diving straight into what, why, how, etc., but first understanding where I am so that they can tailor what they're saying accordingly. I think that is a very important thing, because there's no one pitch that works universally for every VC or every person for that matter. Just like, let's say you have a company, you are looking for a co-founder. Your pitch to that potential co-founder will be different from your pitch to your angel investor, and it'll be different from your pitch to an employee that you're hiring, right? So things like that. So extend that to even VCs. Same thing. Like within VCs, you have flavors, different experience levels, expertise levels, and so on. So that those things of, are you stepping back and looking at who it is that you're talking to, get some basic things, and of course, how well you articulate the problem you're trying to solve. Why is it important? And how is your solution different? So this part that I just said is pretty standard. Like every VC would want clarity on that. But then I look at these other meta level, how receptive the founder is. Are they equanimous when presented with an interrupting question, perhaps? Things like that add to the founder's overall ability, in my view, to solve different problems, right? And overall it signals openness. The moment somebody's listening and truly trying to answer a question, I think that is the kind of person who will also truly listen to the problem, or look at the whole problem and try to come up with solutions, versus somebody who's like just waiting for me to finish the question and just jump into something. That typically signals a little bit of restlessness, maybe a little bit of like, just let's get done with this question and answer kind of a thing. So those are things that I try to weed out early on. Other than that, of course, some founders come with zero previous exits. So their first time they're founding a company. Some founders have like 3 times exited, 4 times, whatever, and some millions or billions in exits. While you can mention those, do you lead with those? Or do you lead with the problem, right? For example, you are starting a company and it's in the space of, let's say, preventing heart attacks completely, right? If you start with, hey, I am a 10-time exited founder and such things, your emphasis is on you, not on the problem in the pitch. You're not leading with like, hey, I am trying to solve this critical problem of completely preventing heart attacks. And that's the problem that you're trying to solve. And that's how I understand. So what I'm saying is, in the pitch, there are a lot of these signals that I look at. While everything is not a make or break, there are some things that I start forming opinions on. There are some startups which come and start throwing names at me. Oh, we have this, we have that investor, we have this, and blah, blah, and all without necessarily looking to see if that is what I'm looking for. I'm looking to understand what you're trying to build. So It's a hard thing to give a definitive list, but this is the way I approach assessing founders. And of course, at the end of the day, if they have exited 3 times before, yes, kudos. But if that's the focus point, right at the first call or something, I may not be impressed. Things like that.
Like what I'm understanding is you look at what problem they're trying to solve, then who are these people who are solving the problem, and can they read the room?
Correct. Can they read the room is very important, no matter what, right? Like you may be a 3 time exited founder, maybe all three were fluke because somebody gave you the opportunity. It's a combination, right? And like I said, not everything is a make or break, but what it does is it helps me tune my next level of diligence should I move forward on them, right? So that's the idea.
And what's something founders believe about venture capital that is completely wrong?
I don't know if this is the belief, but a lot of times I get this sentiment that the founders are surprised that VCs have some sort of pressure. It almost takes me back to whether I was truly naive in believing that this VC guy is a one rich guy with so much money. The founders almost kind of feel like that is the situation because when I say no, we're still fundraising, or hey, we're doing this, or right now we can only do such some check size 50,000 something, it comes to them as a surprise. They're like, oh, really? You also are fundraising? So I'm like, yeah. So it has happened a few times that I've taken note that it's not a very common knowledge. That's one. I think on the medical med tech side of things, it is also hard for founders sometimes to understand that there is an added pressure that medical technology VCs, neurotech for us, for example, life sciences, we are often compared with other VC funds which are investing in software, AI, SaaS kind of things, where the timelines are shorter, the cost to enter is lower, and it comes down to now with AI, it's actually become a little more chaotic, but it still is relatively low cost to develop software than it is to develop devices, less so devices that are embedded in your body or are treating something and so on. So we as VCs sitting in the middle feel like there's a lot of tussle there. The investors who invest into our funds, they understand, but they're like, oh, we still want something that exits within 5 years or something of that sort. And the founders, well, they have to do what they have to do in order for the product to advance in a right way, right? The FDA regulatory has to approve, the insurance has to also absorb it, the surgeons or the doctors have to be able to use the device. So a lot of these things come into picture. In all of this, the founders side and the LP side and the VC side can argue the hell out of what's a good timeline, but Mother Nature doesn't care. At the end of the day, if it's a medical device, biology, medicine is what dictates the timelines, right? You cannot say heart, okay, come quickly grow a muscle, or hey, brain, grow your million neurons quickly now. That's not going to happen. So it takes its time, and sometimes they are irreparable things. So we are in that field. So specific to my field, this is also what founders don't necessarily understand, that there is a pressure on the other side, which is fundraising and also the expectations to exit.
Let's say I'm a founder and I come to you and I want to pitch, but what X factor should I have that will make you, or not should I have, like in my pitch, should have that will make you lean forward, like, oh, this guy's talking about something interesting.
Yeah, it's simply the clarity and a good sized market. A lot of times people come to me with marginal improvements into technology, and maybe that will help generate some revenue and so on. I would argue that maybe they're not venture capital worthy. You have to think about venture capital as are the returns outsized? Why? Because venture capital firms invest in maybe anywhere a number of companies into a portfolio. Now, it is inherently a risky venture, pun totally intended. And so there are expectedly underwritten failures in the companies. Now, the way it'll still become rewarding is when at least one or a few companies hit an outsized return potential. So if we look at companies which return like X or 3X or something in a longer term time frame, while that may be stable, most people may argue they would just do index tracked funds, S&P 500, real estate, and those kind of things, right? So it's is that sort of risk taking that can be also, it's a double-edged sword essentially. You get good returns, but you also may lose a lot in along the way. And the losses come up first in venture capital funds. That's why they call it the J curve. First you see all the losses, then you start seeing, if at all, the returns. So so when founders come and pitch to me, what are some X factors? They need to have, like I said, but they also need to know that, or they also need to show me that they're going after a big market, big opportunity. Now, some combination of these two. I'm not saying big market means you have to go after trillions of dollars. In fact, a lot of people use this same kind of a guidance, and they start putting these big TAM numbers, total addressable market,
Mm-hmm.
and say, oh, we are in the diabetes space, 60 billion, 100 billion. Yes, but you're not going to be taking on that whole thing. Oh, eventually we can. Yes, sure, got it. So let's focus on what you can do now and how is it different. And so now when you drill down, it becomes very evident. When you drill down, it becomes evident that, oh, the TAM is basically the entire diabetes something from a pitch book report. But that's not it. They're doing a device which in certain diabetic patients will be used. So then now you bring it down, right?
So
And so
yeah.
a lot of these number throwing slides and so on is fine. And honestly, it's okay. Like, people want to put the best foot forward. In my case, I sift through some of those. I don't necessarily pay attention to all of that. First, look at the problem, like I said. What is this problem? Do I understand the problem? And then, with that understanding of the problem, do I make sense of the market? And then, therefore, do I see that this has a potential for outsized returns? If not, if it's like 2x or something, it better be a 3 month exit timeline or better be under a year exit timeline. Then I can still make sense. If not, it's no. And in the medical field, again, in the neuro space, in the device space, that X within 3 months, 6 months is very rare given the stage that we invest in. So, yeah.
Talk to us about Chanakya Capital, what it is, what you guys are doing, and how did it come to like where it is today?
Yeah. It's an early stage neurotech focused venture capital firm investing in companies which are incorporated in the US. So they could be set up anywhere else as well, but we would like for them to enter the US market or already have entered the US market. So at least have a US presence. So that's the primary thing. But neurotech devices essentially. As examples, these could be devices that are used to treat or manage diseases or disorders like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, or even condition strokes, for example. Or on the other hand, uh, even mental health or post-traumatic stress, ADHD, autism, any of these, as well as the more movement and pain related. So rehabilitation, for example, or it could also be brain computer interface, neuroprosthetics, and so on. And so any of these are good. In fact, we go even further. Any application of neuroscience and neuroengineering, think of it as a good intersection between neuroscience, electrical, mechanical, bioengineering, all of these put together. That intersection can be made to work for anything in your body, arguably, because your entire body is brain, central, peripheral nervous system, nerves, neurons, all the way through. And so, including things like uh, hunger, what you eat, the gut bacteria signaling your general health to the brain. In fact, the other day I was reading something and I haven't fully vetted it out, but there's been a lot of similar kind of research which says in order to sleep well, it actually you need to eat well. People put like eye mask and warm cloth and this and that. Those are all bandages. But the real thing happens well within your stomach. Well, no kidding, because the gut
Mm-hmm.
has like millions of nerve endings. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure that you could put all the sleep mask and everything and play good music and everything, but in your inside your body, if you're not at a good equilibrium, then you won't sleep well, which is the cause, which will eventually cause things like Alzheimer's, for example, right? And or sleep disorders and therefore inflammation, stress, etc., etc. So this is how fundamental we are with our neurotech applications. So anything, not just brain disorder, diseases, accidents, pain, but also something like this. So if you have a treatment or a management device for inflammatory diseases, we'll still look at it, provided it's neurotech, not pharmaceutical, for example. And where we launched little less than a year ago, let's call it a year ago, and we have 4 portfolio companies already, all 4 doing different things. And we have I would say we have a good pipeline. I say good because in the same time we have close to 80 companies in the pipeline, and out of that we're looking at 6 to 8 companies which are reasonably strong and best candidates currently for our next deployment of capital.
That's great. And someone who comes from engineering background, how is it like to evaluate these type of companies like for you? How do you do that? And what is the process like for you?
While I'm a solo managing partner, I do have advisors. I do have a team that I rely on, whom I want to celebrate also. Now, the first advisor is PhD in neuroengineering from University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and subsequently did her postdoctoral research at Stanford University. And above all of that, she's also my wife. So that really
Oh,
helps. So I can just say, hey, okay, I found this company, quick thing here, this is what's going on. What do you think? And then she at least gives a high level, interesting or no. And that's not it. Of course, we go the entire diligence, we look at the papers and so on. We also have a few scientists in our team who do the diligence, and they ask like really insightful questions because, like, no kidding, if they have a PhD, they've gone through the rigor, they are going to assess the data like there's no tomorrow, and then question you on your approach and so on. So I have a good team like that. We recently also onboarded a neurosurgeon who brings a clinical expertise. So I can actually say, here's a surgical device. Do you think this will work? And in like 2 minutes, he'll say, yeah, but it's not so good. Or yes, it can work, which is still medium for me. Or it's like, oh my God, what is this? I want to see this. That means like, okay, this is some game changer, right? So I have that. On a day-to-day basis, I cannot still keep on hounding all of these individuals for everything. So over a period of time, I also built my own intelligence based on asking the right kind of questions. This is something that I've, even just prior to launching the fund, one thing that I used to do was consult or provide like freelance consulting advisory to aspiring startup founders in different fields. And so sometimes those things were not readily understandable. Like I didn't know what it was, but I would still ask them, so why and how and why not do this and so on. And I just double down on that even now because that the fundamental engineering hat is something that I can put on and I can critically assess through questions why they're doing something that they're doing. And in some cases, the answer is straightforward. They're just doing this because FDA told them that they need to do it. Okay, understood. That means over a period of time, I now know that this is likely why the founder is doing something. But just to confirm, I'll ask and say, okay, got it. Or if I hear something contradictory, I have my knowledge base that I've picked up, and then I compare it with say, okay, maybe it's not truly applicable in all cases. So I'm also machine learning myself on a day-to-day.
so yeah, great insights, Varun. I just come from a very software engineering background. So if you were to explain like what neurotech is to a software engineer like me or anyone who has no idea about it, how would you like to do that?
Okay, well, that depends on which side of neurotech you want to understand. Is it the technology part, or is it the venture and the return potential part, or something else, maybe a research side of things? So first, I'll ask you that back.
Okay, so we can start with what neurotech is, and then we can go in depth of all the parts slowly, and
Yeah, so I don't know if there's a formal definition, but what we define neurotech is any technology that leverages neuroscience broadly and implements engineered devices and technology solutions to treat any problem or disease that relates to the human body, particularly the brain, central nervous system, but also to things that use nerves like heart, intestines, spinal column, etc., etc. And so that's the first thing. The second thing, when you go slightly deeper, then you draw a couple of different axes. So the first axis is disease disorders. So giving you examples like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, ALS, or things like ADHD, autism, or bipolar disorder, and things like that on one side. The other side is what the technology is doing for any of those. Is it treating? Is it diagnosing? Is it managing? Is it suppressing? That. And then is it imaging, or is it electromagnetic, or is it heat? Is it a combination, or is it electrical signals? Is how what kind of specific technology you're using to tap into any of these things. So those are orthogonals that you draw. In other definitions, you can basically include, well, it could be a new term, bioelectronics. So biology, electronics, the interface of those. But if I just leave it at that, it seems like a solution. But again, the problem is something, some condition. Maybe your heart is misfiring because the nerves are overactive. Maybe
Mhm.
your intestines are not signaling that you have received your capacity and you should not be eating more, perhaps. And maybe that's why you're eating a little more. And then maybe that's called in turn causing inflammation, and that has other ramifications. Or in other cases, you're not sleeping well, which is why there is a toxic buildup of proteins or particles in your brain. And then those think of it like a heavy jam on a US 101 or 880 or anywhere else in India, you can say, a traffic jam, where there is just so much there. They've just come to a log jam that slowly you have to take it out one by one and then provide a different pathway for them to just clear out. So imagine that sort of thing happening in the brain as well. So your regular sleep is not able to flush out the toxins in a timely manner. It's almost like all the roads are and lanes are blocked and the emergency vehicle is not able to pass. So now, can you do something else? And can you airlift some of these things? Can you provide an alternate pathway for this clearance to happen and so on? So the last bit that I talked about are examples of how neurotech is leveraged. But the first thing is still any technology that leverages or is founded on neuroscience, right, is neurotech, in my opinion.
Okay, and as from an investor's lens, how do you view the neurotech as an industry? And then we can go in depth.
So, as an industry or as an investor or a potential investor, what is neurotech? It's a sector that focuses on neuroscience and technology. It could be pharmaceutical solution or it could be devices. We focus on devices, and then the idea is again same thing, to treat, manage diseases, or to help surgeons perform their tasks and activities, or surgeons or clinicians do their task easily, better, such that the patient outcomes are improved. And this is a vastly underserved market, underserved and underpenetrated. And as investors, you want to invest in areas that are not yet fully discovered and go in there, because therein lies the bigger opportunity. And also, okay, well, you can argue that there are a lot of other industries which are also undiscovered or relatively low penetration, but they may not generally generate returns. But the case in point here for neurotech is every investor has a brain. They fully use it or not is a different thing, but that's not where we're going. But everyone who has life has brain, the nervous system and so on. And if you expand, actually, even if you cut out the neuro focus, even the medical technology, everyone has a need for it. And it's not only old people or diseased people or something. As soon as you're born, you are in the hospital system, typically, right, or under care. And so all of that starts then. So generally itself, it's an underpenetrated market, particularly neurotech is that way. And then as an investor, you want to go after these kind of underpenetrated, undernoticed, underrepresented markets, which are applicable to everyone. That is why the big return potential in this case.
So does that mean it's disruptive startups, like is what you look for as in from an investor's lens?
In my opinion, the sector itself is disruptive for this reason.
Yeah,
The entire sector is disruptive.
and
You
saves
look at
lives,
the what?
and it saves lives.
Exactly. That's what. So disruptive saves lives. Yes. Game changer. Call it that as well. Another example I can tell you is, let's say you are paralyzed. You are now able to use devices that are implanted, or bionic hands, legs that are implanted that you can operate, or you can have electrodes plugged into your head. So even though you're sitting and you're otherwise still not moving, you can actually start feeling somebody's handshake. And there's a video which I wish I could share, or maybe I'll send it to you in a separate thing. One of our portfolio companies has shown that as a demo. They have a hand that they do, bionic hand, that integrates with the muscles directly. And so you can unscrew it and put it onto a robot, and then those electrodes can be put into this person. He already had that opening, I suppose. And so it works as an open AI interface, open robotics interface. So it's plugged into where the hand signals, the touch signals, etc., would go. And so now with that robotic hand, this person was blindfolded, and somebody was testing. So they would like just randomly touch like this fingertip, and they say ring finger, and then they would be like again ring finger, index finger. And so that is, quite simply put, restoring something that this person had lost forever. And that, I don't know how else to put it. Another story where an army sergeant lost his hand. They put this hand and he was able to train it, and within minutes use it regularly, pick up the phone, dial things, and so on. All that is great. But as soon as he held his daughter and pinched her cheeks, he started crying just automatically, because that's something that he never felt he could do again. And here he has the soft cheeks that he could feel through this, and he's like, "Oh my God!" And that's it. He instantly cried. And so there's a huge impact as well. Only like life changing. Life saving, but yeah, life changing. restoring somebody's lost sense is a beautiful thing. And so, yeah, these are the kind of technologies we look at.
No, wonderful, wonderful. Like that's actually saving lives and doing great. So looking back, like at the best founders you have met, what do they all have like in common?
The best founders seem to be able to move things forward generally. Pretty hand wavy and ambiguous way of saying it. But, as a founder, you will run into a lot of issues at the same time or at any given time. It is very easy to get bogged down because, yeah, hey, that's one thing you are focused on. And of course, a lot of founders come with specialist AA specialization. So let's say you have a software engineering background, and so when you start your company, very likely that you will get into the trenches of engineering and software and things like that. But as a founder, you may have to actually just let somebody else do it, trust that other person to take care of it, of course, watch and guide and those kind of things. But you have those specialist areas that you have to sometimes just let go of and focus on other things. So the successful founders are the ones who don't get stuck in that one trench that they are in. Look at ways to make things happen, even though some things or most things seem stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Often this manifests in fundraising. So if we find that founders are not fundraising enough, can they approach other angles, other ways to do this? Do they have to get stuck on VCs only? Maybe they can raise a little more through friends and family or through philanthropic organizations, things like that. And show generally your hustle, your ability to say, okay, well, if this doesn't work, we'll try to make it this way. And only then, when you exhausted all the options, then you say, yeah, you know what, maybe not. Maybe then calling it quit is also important at the right time because you don't want to completely go so deep and badly into one problem where you're not understanding that nobody's funding this maybe because nobody's interested in this, and so that's a big signal too. So I know, a lot of podcasts will talk about these success stories where the founder never gave up. I think there's a little bit of a delicate balance there. It's not like a crazy never give up. It's more like look at the signals, and along the way you have chances to fix things and correct things. So the best of the founders are doing that. The best of the founders, most importantly, are open to conversation and understanding perspectives, feedback essentially. They may not be able to use that feedback right away directly, but they will listen. And that is pretty important.
And in 2026, there is no conversation. Like, there is an impossible conversation if we don't mention this term, which is used widely in the industry, and I'll say misused as well, AI. What AI has done in your industry, you have been a software engineer yourself. So from then to today, how things have changed, how innovations have changed, how founders have changed. And one more thing I would love you to touch upon is like, we see a lot of people like don't not applying brain and they're just using chat gpt or claude or whatever to just instead of thinking they're just doing those things. So what impact will that have on the future?
Well, that's a pretty huge and heavy conversation in itself. Uh, I do actually teach over summer. I teach a course called Introduction to Engineering to high schoolers across the world through an online program that Stanford offers. And one of the things that I tell them is, in my class, you are allowed to use AI, ChatGPT, etc., etc. Just be mindful of certain sections where you should not be using, and that's to your own benefit, because if in that place you use ChatGPT, then you're kind of defeating the purpose of learning that bit. Once you do that, use the AI and ChatGPT to enhance yourself. So that's a quick thing of how I see generally AI and ChatGPT or tools generally. And there it is, tool. It's a tool. Would you let a child 8 years old drive a car? No. Would you let a child 8 years old use AI? Should not, ideally. But the world is going into unknowns really, like, very
Mm-hmm.
quickly. So I don't want to prescribe anything here. Okay, so what has it done in the software industry? In the software industry, it has started amplifying and speeding up work that senior engineers, staff level engineers would do, because they don't want to write this boilerplate code to, like, oh, import this class and do this equal to that and initialize things and set up a class structure and so on. They just want something to just generate, spit out something, and they have a whole file that they have generated. And now they focus on the crux of it or just fixing it. The time it takes for a senior person to fix some of these bugs of early, like, boilerplate coding is pretty low. On the other hand, for entry level engineers, it's harder. So this is bound to happen in any field that you pick. So it is sort of like when you look at driving cars as well, used to have these cars which used to be hand crank started way in like 1920s or something, and then you had these clutch gears and all of those kind of things which now we don't need with automatic transmission cars, right? So you don't need all of that. And then even in those much older cars, or even up to the 80s, I know there were some cars where we had to measure oil by dipping stick and so on. You don't need to do that. While engineers of that time or drivers of that time could feel proudly about like, this is how you truly know how much oil there is. Is that truly needed? It's not. You have electronics now, alarms and so on and everything. And there was a brief period of time where those alarms were faulty often, and so you still needed to know to fall back to this mechanism. But now most of them are so reliable that you don't need to fall back even. It's just straightforward. Even in the aviation industry, things are like that. With technology advancing, I expect that sort of thing to happen with AI, which is already happening in the application side. So there are a lot of AI wrappers because senior folks now used to previously think of like, oh my God, I have to bootstrap, I have to sit on weekends and churn out this much code for this to work, and then I have to deploy it and then do this and so on, then work on something that I can demo, etc., etc. So they would have had to budget like 4 to 6 months from their day jobs in their spare time, of which again they have games to watch, kids to take care of, rest that they need to take or go to a concert. And so this time used to get stretched. Well, now with all these tools, you are able to generate a lot of this boilerplate in a matter of a few hours, nearly workable prototype. And you don't really, as a senior staff level engineer, principal level engineer, that is not where your primary intelligence is, right? Like anyone can do it. So just do it. Now work on the next step. So it's accelerated that time frame. It has lowered the cost to enter. And with that, now people have gone abstract, layers on top of layers. So now you have these apps deploying apps, right? And things like that. So there, the good part is that people who know what needs to be done, dipstick, oil measure kind of thing, they now have an alarm to look at and they're like, oh, okay, fine, I understand. And they can put together like, oh, it has been particularly hot or particularly cold, and therefore this has been consumed a lot more or something like that. Those who don't know those fundamentals are completely blindly adhering to these alarms, and there is a near-term risk. That's pretty much AI and Chat GPT. Honestly, it is an amplifier, but only senior or experienced veterans would know that it is still hallucinating often or churning out mistakes, and you need to know where they might be and fix it. If you put this in the hands of junior engineers, it may take them much longer. And at that point, they might as well have done the regular route and then come to this to help improve it. Again, this is that transition phase. In the future, maybe in 2 to 3 years, maybe 5 years, there'll be a lot more tools which are a lot more reliant, and then a lot more people are able to generate code and so on. Then it comes to a question of whether it's going to be a dystopia or utopia. I'm not sure. I don't want to get into that. A lot of jobs have been displaced. Previously, it was just the truck drivers and farm workers maybe who were automated out. But now it's software engineers also going out, right? Unless they restructure or relearn something and do something else. Which is where I think I come back to intersection of technologies. Neurotech, I think, is a good such place where you can apply your software, computer science, hardware, electrical engineering, chemical, bio, medical, all of these things come together into these kind of fields. Same with climate tech. So overall, with deep tech, this is the advantage you have. So I think the world is getting a little more into the hardware and deep tech side now that the software has become much more commoditized. AI has become commoditized, and that is pretty much it. So a lot of movement in the market. AI is a tool. Don't just completely rely on it, but it does amplify things. So use it as an use it as a co-pilot or an intern or an assistant. So you do things in a better way. And even things like forming legal documents or things like that, while it's not fully recommended, you at least do get a lot of boilerplating done. And then instead of taking like 3 hours of a legal firm's time, you can just run it by and say, okay, here's just half an hour of your time, and just make sure that there's no red flags.
From a VC's lens, how does your analysis or anything has been impacted by AI?
Yeah, same thing. I still have to watch carefully because it can hallucinate, and sometimes it's a little too powerful to leave it do whatever it does. Because power with incorrect input or power with like assumed power, like, oh, I can do all of these things, is also bad. So there are tools which want to do the best, and so they go scrape out all the information from the web also perhaps. But therein they may be able to find some old pages which have some metadata somewhere about a company which is not even relevant anymore. So now it's like, oh, what? They're already approved? No, something, okay, no idea. So you have to be very careful. For us, we've had a little bit of that learning and we said, you know what, we'll just pause. What we'll use AI for is like menial work. We have a sheet where we have filled out all the diligence human people. And then we say, okay, take this sheet as input and fill up these questions, and therefore we'll make the deal memo. Then it'll fill up most of it. Then we go over it and see, okay, well, here are some things that need to be fixed. Spellings these days are not a problem. There used to be a time where spellings were graphics and so on. So we don't worry about those and we just fix and format things. For us, that's how it has been. There are others who rely more on the AI now because it's available and they don't need to now hire anybody to do that diligence. But I would argue that those are a little more generalist and who are co-investing small checks into like bigger rounds where they're just looking to scatter investments and they just want to make sure that they are doing the right thing. We still want to focus on the human aspect of diligence.
And at Sofin, we do spend a lot of time thinking about what makes a company venture ready. So, in your opinion, what does that actually mean? What does being venture ready mean?
Yeah, it goes back to one of the things that I said. I've been thinking about this a lot. I think a lot of companies mistake, or a lot of founders mistake uh, their company or their idea as a venture grade idea. You have to understand that. So I know my cousin, um, who wanted to start his own company. He still may be able to do so, but he was dabbling through ideas and he used to go to these meetups and be like, okay, what if we do this? What if we do that? And so on. There was one idea he came up with, which was somehow tying up airline and arrival information with Uber and Lyft or some sort of like a ride share where on the same flight, like multiple passengers can ride pool. And I said, sustainability and climate wise, I think it's a very responsible product solution. I think it's a good one. But when you think about the logistics and the kind of things that you need to make work and your margins, and we went to that. I'm just summarizing this in like a minute. Is it really going to be super profitable? Like how much are you going to spend and how much revenue do you expect to make? And this is going to be a B2C solution. So then you have user churn that you have to worry about and so on. Like how many times have you, I asked him, how many times have you installed an app and used it and just within 1 week you have like kind of forgotten or thrown it away? So think about it that way. And that one time this person uses the app and it works and everything is fine, then somebody may not be comfortable. Now you have to worry about other aspects. Like you are essentially matching complete strangers just because they were on the same flight, like me on seat number 10 and somebody on seat number 17. We don't, and so now you get into that space. Already Uber is in that space and so on, but then now you're matching it, so then that becomes a problem. And algorithms and so on, is it truly going to save something? So a lot of founders first need to understand, give it a hard think, is it really venture grade? And it may be venture grade for certain VCs, right? In certain other spaces, it may not be venture grade. So, like a SaaS solution may be fine if you are saying it's an open source solution and I'm doing this for like good street cred. Great. If you're doing it to raise money and make it something big, well, first of all, understand and see if somebody else is also doing that. There are, at this point, I've heard of so many SaaS solutions which are very similar that I don't know what to say. So to the founders, I would say, keep your ears to the ground and you will be faced, especially if you are in these kind of shallower tech, AI enabled tech, you will have Me Too solutions, a lot of them. So does that mean you get discouraged? Maybe not, but it is a strong indicator that you really need to differentiate yourselves in not technology, but the user experience. And that goes back to testing, product marketing, and those kind of things, testing the market and so on, and being receptive to that. And looking at insights that you can leverage to pivot, micro pivots, mini pivots, or a full on pivot. Don't be so sold on that one idea that you have that is going to be the end of it, right? There's a lot of iterations. So if you look at even Google Maps, first versions I used at least had no audio input that I could give, right? I had to type everything and there was no autocomplete. I had to type the entire address. If there's some address mistake, then it would, whatever, it would barf out. Airbnb, I heard, had an interesting story where they had bookings on a website, on a simple landing page, and then they would take the information, and some humans would call up these places and then make those things happen. Now, of course, it's nowhere close to that, but the first versions of the product were that. And it started working at that level, then they started investing more, then they started investing more. So this is very important to understand, that your end goal and end vision of something that you're trying to build may be something that nobody wants. Along the way, you have these chances to test it out, listen, and see if this is genuinely useful, or if it is useful only at a certain price point. And if that price point then doesn't make sense for the company, those are things that you can start fine tuning on. That's my advice.
And what's like that trend in startups or technology today, like that you think is massively underestimated right now?
What do you mean trend?
Like in terms of what's it like in terms of the future predictors or something?
Oh, I don't know if I have a very clear answer for that. I think the world is already very chaotic at this moment, that I cannot just say, okay, this is what it is. I think keeping to my space, I'm seeing some trends where like things like cardiovascular devices or spinal cord and pain management devices are kind of becoming a very normal, incremental kind of technologies already, because there's already so much out there. There are neurotech entirely is a new sector, but neurotech is a sector which generally has a little more disruptive potential. But even there, you can find out some things that are like, okay, marginal improvements. General AI and SaaS, I've been detached from that industry as a VC, so I don't necessarily want to comment. But deep tech, physical AI are the ones that are catching on. The inference is now becoming a major pain point, because companies have long been, and even now are still focused on the training aspect of it, but not on the deployment aspect, and the inference aspect. So I think there are companies that have been working on the inference, good for them. And so it'd be good for the companies to think about how they deploy, so that the cost for the hosting company, the solution, the product, etc., overall is low. And at the end of the day, it keeps the carbon footprint also low. So keeping that in mind, quantum computing is something that I'm hoping really advances and becomes a little more reliant. A lot more reliable, because it does have that power together with AI to speed up research in these life sciences, especially, or even like I guess climate tech with hard like battery technology and those kind of things as well. And so while I'm not on that bleeding edge of quantum AI and where quantum computing and where it is at, I do know it has that potential. So together with AI, I think that is a trend we need to watch out for. And I already talked about the devices space.
So the goal of this podcast was to cater young, aspiring, and current founders and VCs. So a 22-year-old boy walks up to you and he says that I want to be in the VC space. What advice would you give to him?
Wants to be in the VC space?
Yeah,
Meaning like as an investor eventually.
yeah. He wants to be who you are today. So
Believe it or not, I have a couple of interns already who are in that age range. One is a fantastic girl doing her bachelor's, and recognizes, and especially in life sciences, recognizes that it's going to take time, because there are other folks in my team are all PhDs and with years of experience and so on. I said, well, that's okay. It's also important to therefore know clearly that you have to focus on the hard science of it, first understanding enough depth of it, but also keep doing the diligence, keep doing the research work. Most importantly, don't do things that you think are important. Do things that are important for the company, for the fund, for the venture fund. In doing so, you start learning what are the typical problems of the VC fund and how you solve them. Maybe you have a creative epiphany and you're like, "Oh, this is how we can solve it." Run it by the managing partner or a GP like me. Run it by, and hopefully, like in my case, I'm pretty empowering to all of my interns, and I say, you think about the solution and you tell me, oh, but I don't know this space. Well, okay, figure out what you need to know or ask me. But then at the end of the day, nobody's going to give you 100% of the answer. Go figure it out. Let's see what you come up with. Some mistakes I'll point out, go back, come back, right? But so long as you're accountable, so long as you keep at it, you'll be able to do it. I think a lot of 22-year-olds may worry that it's a lot more technicalities at their age and their experience level. To do the best job that they want to eventually do, yes, it's good to be technically knowledgeable. You don't want to be this fluffy, like a graduate with zero experience in the real world, and in a position where you feel like you're not being valued or taken seriously by a founder who's like 3 decades experience in a field that you don't have any experience in. Heck, forget in a field, even just running a company, heck, even being a part of a company. So
Yeah.
you have to be careful with that ambition. Maybe if anything, I can say the way I've tuned my career is when I felt like that kind of inadequateness in my skill set, I try to up level a bunch of these to get to a point where I'm confident. Then I go talk to more people and understand and so on. Even then, my entry into VC was not like a simple thing. So it's very important to persist. And of course, at the end of the day, you always have to also hope for opportunities to be given to you. Because ambition and passion don't mean anything when it's not met with opportunity. With
Mm.
Chanakya Capital, we understand and recognize that, which is why we are big on opportunity. So we have interns who come and say we want to do it. I tell them, yeah, sure, no interview, no problem. Start with this task, show me how you're doing it, and then we'll see. So, but then at
Oh,
least there is an opportunity that happens. So, so that's how we see it as well. For these 22-year-olds that you're talking about, I think that's the things. Be ears to the ground again. Learn at least a core skill, a core thing. Given what we just talked about AI and where the trends are and so on and so forth, it is very important to, while pursuing one sort of degree in one field, to already start learning some other fields where this can intersect, so you are multidimensional. And that is the one thing that will help you as VC.
and
Among other
one
things.
last question before we leave. If I'm a founder, I have a meeting with you tomorrow. What should be my prep? Like, what should I look out for? Like, okay, this might catch Varun's eye, or like, what quality, one quality that you think that you will like that can make me stand out and make you interested in me.
Yeah, be very clear, and even at the expense of answering a question and letting me ask a follow-up, it's okay. Because one, it gives you an idea of if I'm engaged enough in the conversation, and if I'm not, save your time. Say, okay, it was nice meeting you. Thank you. What else can I do? And that's it. That's also important. Not just for me, but any VC, but you're asking about me. So I would appreciate that because when I'm engaged, I ask questions and I like for those opportunities. And also, don't get into the fluff and FOMO, right? Sure, tell me, yeah, you're closing this round soon and so on, but don't artificially do it. For me, it doesn't work. For me, the depth of the matter that and the problem you're trying to solve and how well you've done it so far is what matters more than, oh, we are closing this round as of tomorrow or whatever, and we have like this guy from that and that guy from this investing. Okay, good, but yeah.
Okay. Well, it was wonderful speaking with you, Varun. I really hope to learn more in future, and we would love to have you in future. But for now, thank you so much, everyone, for listening.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Thank you, Palash, for the
Yeah.
opportunity. Fantastic questions.